There is a specific kind of suffering that nobody talks about. Not grief. Not failure. Not physical pain. It is the slow, suffocating exhaustion of being surrounded by minds that refuse to think. You have felt it. You are sitting across from someone, a colleague, a relative, a stranger online, watching them speak with absolute, unshakable certainty about something they have completely and catastrophically wrong. And you feel it rise in you. Not just frustration. Something deeper. Something almost like grief. The grief of knowing that no matter what you say, no matter how airtight your reasoning, no matter how cleanly you dismantle their argument, nothing will change. They will smile. They will blink. And then they will repeat themselves. Arthur Schopenhauer lived this. He was arguably the sharpest philosophical mind of the 19th century, and he was surrounded by exactly the kind of intellectual mediocrity that would make any thinking person want to vanish into solitude forever. He didn't just complain about it. He studied it. He mapped it. He developed a ruthless, almost surgical system for surviving it. What you are about to learn is not how to tolerate stupidity. It is how to master the psychological architecture that protects your mind from it entirely. Here is the trap that intelligent people fall into without ever realizing it. It is not arrogance. It is not stubbornness. It is something far more innocent and far more dangerous. You believe in truth. You genuinely, deeply believe that if someone is shown the correct information, presented with clear evidence, guided through sound logic, they will update. They will adjust. They will move toward accuracy the way a compass needle moves toward north. Schopenhauer called this the deadliest delusion of the educated mind. He observed, with brutal precision, that human beings do not argue to find truth. They argue to win. To assert dominance. To protect the fragile architecture of an identity built on the shaky foundation of being right. The psychologist Daniel Kahneman divided the human mind into two systems. System 1 is fast, instinctual, emotional. System 2 is slow, deliberate, rational. The vast majority of human beings live almost entirely in System 1. They feel something, attach a belief to it, and treat that belief as permanent fact. When you, an intelligent person operating in System 2, attempt to engage them with nuance and data, you are not having a conversation. You are trying to install new software on a machine that runs a completely different operating system. It cannot process your input. It will reject it. Every time. Without exception. And here is the cruelest part of the trap: the more clearly you argue, the more threatened they feel. Because they do not experience your logic as information. They experience it as an attack on their identity. And the human ego will burn the entire world to ash before it concedes that it is wrong. In 1999, psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger published a study that reframed everything we thought we knew about human incompetence. Their finding was not simply that ignorant people are overconfident. It was something far darker than that. The very cognitive skills required to be competent at any given task are the exact same cognitive skills required to recognize competence in the first place. Which means the profoundly incompetent are not just ignorant. They are structurally incapable of recognizing their own ignorance. They lack the internal measuring instrument. The thermometer is broken, so they cannot feel the fever. Schopenhauer understood this intuitively a century before the study was published. In The Art of Being Right, he described ignorance not as a hole, an absence of knowledge, but as a wall. A thick, internally reinforced, emotionally fortified wall. Built not from stupidity alone, but from the terror of complexity. Think about what it would mean for a foolish person to truly accept your correction. It would not just mean admitting they were wrong about this one fact. It would mean dismantling years of self-image. It would mean opening themselves to the terrifying possibility that they are wrong about many things. That the world is larger and more complicated than the comfortable, simplified version they have been living inside. The ego will not allow that. Cognitive load theory tells us that the human brain actively resists information that requires structural reorganization. It takes the path of least resistance. Which, for the average mind, means doubling down, deflecting, attacking the messenger. So when they reject your perfectly constructed argument, understand, they are not being difficult. They are being human. The fortress protects them. And they will defend it until they die. So what do you actually do? If logic fails, if evidence backfires, if compassionate explanation only deepens the trench, what is the move? Schopenhauer's answer was elegant and merciless. You stop fighting them entirely. You do not argue against them. You do not try to expose them. You pick up their own weapon and you hand it back to them, pointed at themselves. He called this reduction to absurdity. Reductio ad absurdum. And in his hands, it was not a debating tactic. It was psychological judo. Here is how it works in practice. Your coworker insists that your entire project strategy is backwards, that the whole industry is doing it wrong, and that his instinct, based on nothing quantifiable, is obviously correct. Your natural impulse is to defend your research. Don't. Instead, lean forward. Nod slowly. Say, you may be absolutely right. In fact, if we follow your logic all the way through, we should probably scrap the entire framework, fire the analysts, and base all future decisions on gut feeling alone. I'll draft that memo today. Should we copy the board? Watch what happens. You have not insulted them. You have validated them completely. But you have accelerated their premise to its catastrophic, logical destination, and forced them to look at where their own thinking leads. The fool operates only on the surface. They formulate an opinion and never once think about where it goes. When you force them down that road, their brain short-circuits. Suddenly they are the ones injecting nuance. Suddenly they are the ones applying brakes. They are arguing against their own position to save face, while you stand there having done nothing but agree with them. You did not defeat them with your intelligence. You defeated them with theirs. But here is the piece that most intelligent people refuse to do. The piece that is more psychologically demanding than any argument you will ever have. You must kill the part of you that wants to be recognized as right. Intelligent people are quietly addicted to validation. Not in an obvious, needy way. In a sophisticated, high-minded way that they disguise as principle. You tell yourself that you simply care about truth, that you just want accuracy to prevail, that you only engage because the stakes are real. But if you are honest, brutally, clinically honest, you will admit that a significant part of the drive to argue with fools is the desire for them to concede. You want the moment. The pause. The quiet admission in their eyes. You want to see understanding replace defiance. Schopenhauer would look at that desire and call it the most elaborate form of stupidity available to a clever mind. Why do you require the confirmation of a broken instrument? Why does the validation of a mind you yourself consider inferior hold any weight at all? Why do you need the blind man to compliment your painting? The moment you genuinely, completely surrender the need to be recognized by people who are incapable of recognizing you, something profound shifts. You step out of the ring. You become the observer. You watch the argument the way a surgeon watches a patient's involuntary reflex, with clinical detachment, not personal investment. And from that position, nothing they say can touch you. They no longer hold the remote control to your nervous system. Let them be wrong. Let them stay wrong. It is not your duty to drag them into clarity. It is your duty to protect yourself from the wreckage they carry with them. There is a dimension of this problem that most people never consider until it has already cost them something irreplaceable. Stupidity is contagious. Not in a metaphorical sense. In a measurable, neurological, cognitive sense. Cognitive load theory demonstrates that the human brain operates with a strictly finite supply of mental bandwidth. When you engage with an irrational person, trying to predict their unpredictable responses, managing your own frustration, carefully constructing arguments that will inevitably be ignored, your brain is operating at maximum capacity and doing so in a completely unproductive direction. Sustained cognitive taxation at this level degrades your decision-making ability. It erodes your creative capacity. It makes you irritable, reactive, and increasingly prone to the same lazy, emotional thinking you are fighting against. You become more like them simply by spending time in their mental atmosphere. Schopenhauer was notorious for his solitude. Contemporaries called him a misanthrope. They said he hated people. Read him carefully and you see something entirely different. He did not hate people. He was ruthlessly disciplined about his mental diet. He understood that every hour spent navigating the chaotic irrationality of a lesser mind was an hour your own mind spent operating on corrupted fuel. He wrote that a man of genuine intellect must apply the same discernment to human contact as a physician applies to diet and environment. You would not eat from a contaminated plate simply because someone handed it to you politely. This is not elitism. This is self-preservation at the most fundamental cognitive level. The question is not whether you can survive conversations with foolish people. The question is whether the version of you that emerges from those conversations is still the sharpest version of yourself. In most cases, it is not. Schopenhauer gave us one of the most painfully honest metaphors in the history of philosophy. He called it the porcupine dilemma. On a bitterly cold night, a group of porcupines huddles together for warmth. But the closer they press, the more their quills pierce each other. The pain forces them apart. But apart, they freeze. They spend the entire night moving toward each other out of need and away from each other out of pain. Never fully warm. Never free from injury. Schopenhauer saw this as the central predicament of intelligent people navigating an ordinary world. You cannot live in complete isolation. The foolish people are not some distant population you can simply avoid. They are your manager who approves your expenses. They are the family member who calls every Sunday. They are the colleague whose cooperation you need to accomplish anything. They are the client whose money keeps your business alive. You are, inevitably, in proximity to them. The question is what version of yourself you present to that proximity. His answer was the avatar. When you must interact with someone whose cognitive limitations make authentic engagement futile, you do not bring your real self to that conversation. You bring a constructed, functional version of yourself. One that is pleasant without being sincere. Agreeable without being honest. Present without being exposed. The avatar nods. The avatar uses phrases like, "That's an interesting angle," and "I see where you're coming from." The avatar gives them the experience of having been heard without giving them access to your actual thoughts. Your real mind remains behind the interaction, untouched, protected, conserving its energy for the work that actually matters. This is not dishonesty. It is the same principle a surgeon applies when wearing gloves. You are not being inauthentic by protecting yourself from contamination. You are being rational. Now we get to the scenario that produces the most acute suffering. Because arguing with a fool who holds no power over you is merely irritating. Arguing with a fool who holds power over your livelihood, that is genuinely dangerous. What do you do when the most irrational person in the room is also the one who signs your paycheck? Schopenhauer was clear: a person of low intelligence who acquires authority does not suddenly gain the cognitive tools to use that authority wisely. What they gain is the ability to punish anyone who makes them feel exposed. And the person who most consistently makes them feel exposed is the intelligent subordinate who, simply by existing and thinking clearly, holds an involuntary mirror to their inadequacy. If you walk into a powerful fool's domain and display your intelligence openly, you are not demonstrating your value. You are threatening their psychological survival. And they will not respond with logic. They will respond with the only tools they have: bureaucratic obstruction, social sabotage, reputation damage. The solution comes not from modern psychology, but from one of the bloodiest and most brilliant chapters of military history. There is the ancient story of Sima Yi, the strategist who found himself serving beneath a leader of enormous power and spectacular incompetence. Direct challenge was impossible; it would have meant execution. Open defiance meant ruin for himself and everyone around him. So Sima Yi executed something more cunning than any battle plan he ever designed. He simply pretended to be finished. To be diminished. He performed helplessness with such commitment that his enemies stopped watching him. They laughed. They felt safe. They felt superior. And in that moment of their relaxation, he moved. The lesson is not about deception for its own sake. The lesson is about economy of intelligence. You do not reveal your sharpest blade to someone whose first instinct will be to break it. You keep it concealed. You feed the fool exactly what they are starving for, the feeling of superiority, and you purchase your own freedom with that transaction. Ask them for advice on minor matters. Let them correct you on things that are irrelevant. Thank them with sincerity for their contribution. You are not diminishing yourself. You are anesthetizing them while you work. There is a concept that separates the merely intelligent from the genuinely powerful, and it is almost embarrassingly simple once you see it. Attention is a finite, non-renewable resource. Every hour you spend in unproductive friction with an irrational mind is an hour that cannot be spent on your work, your relationships, your creative development, your genuine potential. This is not a metaphor. This is a hard economic reality. The foolish person who drags you into a circular debate does not experience this cost the way you do. For them, the debate is the event. They have no larger project being depleted by this interaction. They are not building anything that requires sustained, uninterrupted concentration. For them, the argument is simply entertainment. For you, it is theft. Schopenhauer applied a ruthless arithmetic to his social life. He calculated the actual cost of each human interaction against its return. Not in a cold or dismissive sense, in a realistic one. He understood that the same hours spent in solitude, reading, thinking, and writing, produced permanent intellectual value. The same hours spent managing the ego of a foolish acquaintance produce nothing except fatigue. This calculus does not make you antisocial. It makes you strategic about where your most irreplaceable resource goes. Schopenhauer employed a specific technique when cornered in an unavoidable conversation with someone he considered beneath genuine engagement. He would use what might be called performed deference. An exaggerated, ironic concession that satisfied the fool's ego completely while requiring nothing from his actual intellect. Your perspective here is so profound, I'm afraid my limited understanding simply cannot do it justice. I'll have to sit with it for a long time. The fool puffs with satisfaction. The conversation ends. Schopenhauer returns to his work. Not a single calorie of real intellectual energy expended. Here is the part that will disturb you, because it asks you to question a motive you have always considered virtuous. You keep engaging with fools not only because you want to be right. You keep engaging because you genuinely believe you can help them. You think, if I can just find the right angle, the right analogy, the right tone, something will click. They will see it. Their life will improve. The mistake will be avoided. The damage will be prevented. Schopenhauer called this the arrogance of empathy. And it is, quietly, one of the most destructive delusions an intelligent person can carry. Think about what this belief actually contains. It assumes that your perception of reality is so clearly superior that the other person's primary need is to be aligned with your view of it. It assumes you have the authority to determine where their cognitive development should go and at what pace. It assumes, beneath all the compassion, that you know better, not just about this one issue, but about what they need to become. This is not compassion. This is a power dynamic dressed in philanthropic clothing. And beyond the philosophical problem, there is the practical one. Dunning-Kruger's research confirms what Schopenhauer intuited: a person in genuine cognitive limitation does not experience your correction as help. They experience it as violation. You are not a healer entering their space. You are an invader threatening the only reality they have ever known. Look at the people in your life you have been trying to improve. The friend whose financial choices baffle you. The family member whose patterns of self-destruction you have analyzed and diagnosed and intervened in for years. Measured in lost sleep, fractured relationships, and depleted energy, what has been the actual return on that investment? Schopenhauer believed that character is fundamentally immutable. That people do not change their nature, they merely change their circumstances. This is a painful idea to accept. But accepting it is the beginning of an extraordinary personal freedom. You stop trying to renovate people. You start managing them. And when you manage rather than reform, you stop being consumed. When you stop fighting them, when you drop the rope, when you release the need to change them and the need to be recognized by them, something unexpected happens. You encounter yourself. And for most intelligent people, this is the most frightening moment in the entire process. Because your sense of identity has been, quietly, enormously tangled up in the role of the smartest person in the conflict. The friction of debate, frustrating as it was, gave you a purpose. A stage. A definition. When you remove that friction, the stage goes dark. And you are left with the actual contents of your own mind, undistracted, unperformed, unvalidated. Schopenhauer believed that most people who claim to enjoy solitude have merely found a comfortable way to be lonely. True intellectual solitude, the kind that produces philosophical breakthroughs and genuine self-knowledge, requires sitting with the silence without filling it. It requires becoming comfortable not just with being misunderstood, but with being genuinely unknown. Fools will misinterpret your withdrawal. They always do. They will call it arrogance. They will tell others that you have become cold, difficult, changed in some negative way. They will say your unwillingness to engage is a sign of weakness or defeat. Let them. Schopenhauer offered an image worth keeping. He said that walking through a world populated by foolish minds is like walking through an asylum. The patients inside will point at you as you pass and call you the strange one. They will insist, with complete sincerity, that you are the one who needs help. Do you stop? Do you pull out your credentials? Do you argue your sanity to people operating within a distorted reality? You keep walking. You understand the nature of the institution you are passing through. And you do not alter your course based on the diagnosis of those within it. We have spent centuries romanticizing the debate. We teach children to admire the great rhetorical battles, the public intellectual who dismantles an opponent with precision and wit. We imagine that victory in argument is what intelligence is for. Look more carefully at every great debate you have witnessed. The opponent never concedes. The audience simply applauds for the position they already held when they walked in. The argument produces theatre, not change. The truly dangerous minds do not play for applause. They play for architecture. They understand that the real game is not winning the argument in the room. It is shaping the room itself. It is constructing the parameters within which others make choices, without those others ever realizing the parameters were designed. This is the transition Schopenhauer pointed toward, not from ignorance to knowledge, but from intelligence to genuine power. And the distinction is critical. Intelligence is knowing you are correct. Power is not needing them to know it. Intelligence is dismantling their argument. Power is making their argument irrelevant by building something they cannot argue against, your actual work, your actual results, your actual progress while they were still debating. When you know that most people operate on ego, you learn to work with ego instead of against it. You give the foolish manager credit for decisions you made. You let the insecure colleague believe the project was their idea. You feed validation strategically, like fuel in an engine, and you go where you need to go while they feel the pleasure of having driven. This is not manipulation in the predatory sense. This is an honest acknowledgement of human nature, followed by the pragmatic decision to operate within it rather than against it. The architect does not ask the concrete to cooperate. The architect understands the properties of concrete and builds accordingly. You clicked on this video because something in you recognized the weight. You have been carrying the exhaustion of the intelligent person in a world that frequently rewards loudness over accuracy, confidence over competence, and emotional volume over analytical depth. You came here looking for a better argument. A sharper rebuttal. A technique for winning. What Schopenhauer offers is something far more valuable and far more difficult. He offers surrender. Not surrender to them. Surrender of the need to change them. The moment you genuinely release the desire to be understood by minds incapable of understanding you, the moment you stop measuring your worth by whether the blind can see your work, something lifts. The friction evaporates. The exhaustion drains. What remains is a quiet, almost startling clarity. You watch them speak and instead of frustration, you feel detached recognition. You see the psychological mechanisms operating in real time. The ego protecting itself. The insecurity performing confidence. The Dunning-Kruger effect playing out exactly as predicted. It becomes almost clinical. And what is clinical is manageable. You are no longer a participant in their chaos. You have become its observer. Your intelligence is no longer something you spend on their education. It is an asset you invest in your own ascent. You protect it with the same intentionality you would protect any finite, precious resource. You deploy it only where it creates actual value. You keep it concealed where exposure would only trigger attack. And gradually, the world changes, not because the fools around you changed, but because your relationship to them did. Schopenhauer spent his final years not embittered, as his critics claimed, but liberated. He wrote with a clarity and a depth that his contemporaries could not match, precisely because he had stopped trying to match himself to them. That is the inheritance he left behind. Not bitterness. Precision. Not isolation. Freedom. Keep your intelligence sharp. Keep it protected. Deploy it only where it builds something worth building. And for God's sake, stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided not to understand. If this opened something in you, if you recognize this not just as philosophy but as a map of your own experience, subscribe. There is more of this work coming, and it goes deeper. Each new video builds on what came before. Every layer goes further into the architecture of the mind that refuses to be ordinary. If you want to go beyond what can be shown publicly, what exists without the limitations of the algorithm, click the join button. The content there does not play by the same rules as what you just watched. Most people who start watching will not finish. Most people who finish will not act. That gap between watching and acting is exactly where your intelligence either serves you or abandons you. You already know which side you are on. The fact that you are still here tells me that.